Good evening folks, Silver here. Today I have two short scary stories for you. Hopefully you enjoy them, as we get into it. Also, before we begin, only a small percentage of you that listen to these stories are actually subscribed, so, if you end up enjoying this narration, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always unsubscribe later. With that, enjoy the stories. Number 1. Beyond the Thicket. Carl reached the end of his driveway and took a left. He was a bit puzzled as to why he hadn't gone this direction yet. He moved in nearly 2 weeks ago, but so far, his nightly walks hadn't led him towards the overgrown thicket. The bent and mangled trees at the end of the street were covered in strangling ivy. Desiccated thorn bushes hid the rot that lay beneath. The dented old sign that stood before the path to the thicket was aptly lettered with the words, "Dead End." Oh well, he mused to himself. Tonight's as good as any night to see what lies in this direction. Following this thought, he lightly patted his back pocket. 2 odd protuberances met his hand. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 C batteries. The absent-minded dummy had brought along fresh batteries, but no flashlight. He decided it didn't matter since every front lawn had a lamppost. They'd be coming on soon enough. But he was a bit uneasy. His father had taught him the importance of being prepared before leaving the house. He turned and glanced back the way he'd come. A slight bend in the road hid his quaint little bungalow from view. The decision to forego heading back to retrieve his flashlight was made when he stumbled over a bit of raised sidewalk. He agilely recovered himself and slowed his quickened pace. It seemed quite odd that he'd already walked so far in just a couple of minutes. His calculation of just how much time had elapsed changed when the sun disappeared behind the trees. The lampposts still hadn't turned on. Just then, Carl heard a strange noise. He spun around but couldn't make out anything more than a few feet ahead. Something darted past him on his left. He quickly turned towards it, but once again, he couldn't see anything. The light breeze picked up momentum, carrying with it the same noise as before. Now stiffly at attention, Carl could make out a whimpering moan. He muttered, "Sweet Mary Joseph," under his breath. Suddenly, Carl felt childish. He found himself out after dark, and there he was, whispering like a frightened boy in need of a nightlight. He knew that all he had to do was step lightly and follow the sidewalk back home. He turned to head home, but just stood there looking ahead. He turned the other way and met with the same issue. He scratched his head. He thought. I turned back towards the way I came when I first heard that noise. Then I turned again, but then No, that's not right. Carl continued to look each way down the sidewalk, but he just couldn't determine which direction would lead him home. The mysterious moaning sounded again. It seemed much closer this time. Carl was shrouded in complete darkness now. He couldn't see his hand in front of his face. Finally, after all of these years, he could empathize with his younger brother, who was deathly afraid of the dark when they were children. He couldn't remember ever being in such utter darkness before in his life. He found it strange that none of the houses on the street had any lights on. Not even the bluish glow of a television emanated from any of his neighbors' windows. His thoughts mirrored his frustration and fear. Where is the moon? And why haven't the lampposts turned on yet? Carl sidled left until he felt grass under his foot. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly as he spun around. He started walking guardedly, with the grass and the edge of the sidewalk each supporting a foot. He decided to follow the invisible line between the 2 different types of terrain beneath his feet until the moon or the lamppost lit his way. The moaning came to his ears again. It was much louder now. Yeah, it's definitely not the wind. His unsteady thoughts reached for some explanation to calm his nerves. He was walking blindly, so he wasn't confident that he could travel any faster than a toddler's walk. A moose, maybe? Sure, there are pictures of moose all over the town. I saw a moose crossing sign just yesterday. When I get home, I'll look up moose calls online. That's right, just concentrate on getting home and chilling out in front of the computer for the rest of the night. The tightness in his clenched jaw and the bunched wad of muscles in his neck loosened a little once he decided it was just a stupid moose. No moose could compare to the frightening creatures his imagination had begun to concoct. Just then, a lamppost came to life. He was so glad to see again. And there he was, standing right in front of his house. He squinted his eyes to guard against the brilliant glare from the lamppost. Stepping into his yard, he looked side to side and noticed that No other lampposts were lit. Glad to be home, and feeling more than a little disconcerted by his strange excursion, Carl let the observation die on his lawn. He quickened his pace to his porch, and there, lying at the foot of the steps, were 3 newspapers. He remembered fetching the Sunday paper that morning, so he was more than just slightly puzzled. He picked up the nearest one, pulled off the rubber band, and unrolled it. Emblazoned across the front page in bold black was the heading, "Murder on May Street." The accompanying photo was of a police officer standing sentry over the path leading into the thicket. Carl glanced at the top of the page. Tuesday? I don't understand. He quickly skimmed through the article while a horrible feeling began to bubble up from within him. The body of an unidentified man was found brutally. Carl dropped the paper and stumbled back onto his lawn. He slumped to the ground in shock and rolled onto his back. He could see the moon directly above him spread out across the night sky. It seemed so large and imposing. Just then, the lamppost went out. The moon offered no reprieve from the darkness, as a loud moan echoed along May Street. Number 2. Ghost Friend. In San Jose, California during the early or mid-90s, my family lived in a trailer. A neighborhood friend introduced me to his own makeshift Ouija board. Basically, it was just a piece of paper with the words yes and no on opposite sides. The planchette was replaced with a string, tied to a small weighted object at the end. We would hold the string between the 2 words written on the paper and ask questions directed to the ghost. The weighted object at the end of the string would slowly start swaying towards the corresponding word to the question asked by us. I don't remember what any of the questions were, but the discussion ended with me believing that I had a cool new ghost friend to talk to. I created my own makeshift Ouija paper and had another chat with this friend before going to bed. Nothing unusual happened yet. The next day, my friend called me on the phone, insisting that I get rid of my makeshift Ouija paper ASAP. He reported that his mum warned him not to mess around with these types of games because, chances are, it would be a demon toying with you. He insisted that I break off the relationship with my ghost friend immediately, and said that he'd already done the same by cursing out the Ouija paper. After hanging up the phone, I immediately went to my room looking for the makeshift Ouija paper. I grabbed the paper, but then decided that the best way to repel an evil spirit was to write "I love Jesus" all over the paper. Halfway through writing Jesus' name, something in my trailer got really upset me. I suddenly heard a very aggressive growling, and even felt the whole trailer vibrating, as if something big and heavy was storming through the trailer. Unfortunately, my back was turned from the door, but the vibration felt like it was something coming from the hallway, heading towards my back. The growling sounds weren't emitting from the ground as one would expect from an animal. Whatever it was that had entered my room, it had to be the same height as me because the growling noise was coming up right behind my head. For some strange reason though, I decided to man up and turn around and face this angry entity that was coming at me. My body tensed up, as I was ready to engage in the biggest fight of my life. As soon as I turned around, however, the noise and vibration stopped. Everything went quiet, but my body was still tense because I was sure that a hostile entity had entered my room. Suddenly, I saw my dad struggling to carry an electric heater as he passed by my door, making grumbling noise as he stopped down the hallway. But I didn't let my guard down. I didn't believe what I saw because I was absolutely certain that something had entered my room. I remained in fight mode, even though I never actually saw anything in the room with me. I felt the vibration and heard the growling coming up right behind me. I was as certain of this angry entity as a bat would be certain of echolocation. "Yeah, right," I said loud in my empty room. I then stepped out into the hallway and looked in the direction where I saw my dad heading. The lights in my parents' room were on. I then called out to my dad, who then replied, "What?" Except, he replied from the living room, the other direction of the hallway. I then asked, "Dad, didn't you just walk into the bedroom?" "No," he replied. I then said, "But I just saw you walk by." "No, he's been in here with me the whole time," my mum said. I then walked down the hallway to my parents' bedroom. It was empty. I then told my parents that the light in their bedroom was on. My dad then said, "Oh, it is? I must have forgotten to turn it off then." I then went back to my room and completed the sentence I didn't get to finish writing. I wrote it again and again, all over the Ouija paper, folded up the paper, and stuck it into a Bible. I left it in the Bible for at least a week before I tore it up and threw it away. This thing that tried to terrorize me never bothered me again. Conclusion: I was like 12 or 14 at the time. I don't do drugs or drink alcohol. I wasn't afraid of the dark, and I never had any imaginary friends or problems sleeping alone at night. My parents aren't the type to play pranks on me either. Even if this was a prank, this prank would be way too elaborate for my parents to pull off. This memory is the only reason I'm not an atheist. There is obviously a lot of evil in this world, physical and apparently non-physical as well. Whatever it was that was in my home, it seriously got pissed at me just for writing the name down. Jesus. If God doesn't exist, then writing Jesus' name on a Ouija paper shouldn't have any effect on it. There would be no reason whatsoever for this evil entity to get upset at me if I was writing a name of a fictitious character. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a Bible geek. I don't believe in every word of the Bible. I do believe in evolution. I trust the scientific method way more than blind faith. I'm also very disgusted with what I've seen religious people do and the claims they make about what God would want or despise. But until I can get a logical scientific explanation of this event, I cannot become an atheist.